All right, Josh Smith here, live at Flat Five Studios again. My guest today is a good friend and one of my favorite musicians, honestly, going these days. I think he's one of the most talented cats out there. He's someone who, when I listen to him play, I can see the hours of, work. I can see the respect and love for all styles of music, which means a lot to me. I love seeing people who I know love and respect the stuff. He's just a special cat who, when you meet him, you always come away just thinking, I love that guy. And he's coming to us from Nashville, Tennessee today. Everybody, welcome JD Simo.
Man, well, I couldn't mirror the sentiment more, man. Shit,
Yeah, man.
mirror it more.
Thank you for doing this. It's a pleasure to talk to you. So, I kind of start everything by asking everybody how they first got the guitar put in their hands. And I actually don't know the answer to this question with you. I don't know a lot about your family upbringing. Mine was not a very musical family, and it was a really random occurrence that the guitar got placed in my hands when I was 3. How did it happen for you?
It was actually very similar because my family is all athletes, and I grew up in Chicago um, and in the city. And my father, you know, is a very athletic, old school. He was 50 when I was born, and he had already raised an entire family of 4 kids in the 50s and 60s. Um, and he was a poor kid from Chicago. He became an ad man. He worked for the Chicago Blackhawks as a scout.
Wow.
He had a very very interesting life. And my mom was like a beauty queen. She was a Miss Illinois 1970, and she was like a hippie. She was born in 1950, and she was like out like it. As I got older, it was like, oh no, oh no. Like when I saw the movie Almost Famous, I was like, oh Jesus, that's my mom. Like because she was out hanging like with very prominent bands and like dating rock stars and stuff in the late 60s and early 70s. Um and so uh you know when I came around, my father was all about sports and all that kind of stuff. And I was an only child in my situation, which you are too, right, Josh? Yeah.
No, no, I have a
Yeah.
sister.
Oh, you have a sister, that's right. And so anyway, I fell in love with music of immediately. I saw Elvis on television, and I saw the movie The Blues Brothers, like when I'm like 2, 3 years old. And that's what started it for me. And it was immediately like I was specifically taken with Steve Cropper and specifically taken with Scotty Moore. Like I just thought the two of those guys were just the coolest dudes ever. And eventually got them to get me a guitar when I was 4. And you know took lessons in the very beginning for a couple of years. And as it's just like getting records and becoming obsessed with records and learning off records. And I was real lucky growing up in Chicago because I had the Lincoln Park Library, and I had access to like every record ever made. And it was blocks from where I grew up. And you could go in and walk out with stacks of records. And also, as you know, it's like if I walked in and I wanted, like I'd read about Sergeant Pepper or heard about Sergeant Pepper or something, then it's like, oh, well, you should check out Pet Sounds, and you should check out, uh, you know, uh, Piper at the Gates of Dawn by Pink Floyd, and you should check out, like the music is like that, where it's like one thing leads to 10 other things. And so I was just really taken with it from an early age, and it was an escape, like we all do. I kind of, there were some messed up things about my childhood, and I tunneled that into music, and went from there. And much like yourself, started playing. Gosh, I mean, I was playing in bars and stuff by the time I was 8, 9 years old. And much like yourself and a lot of other of our friends, it's kind of funny because it's like growing up, I felt so special. And then like as you get older, you meet all your other buddies, and you're like, hey, wait a minute, you got the same damn story. Okay, well, cool.
It is very common among guys. You know what's most amazing to me about that is, obviously it's not just our generation. It's been this way since the beginning. Guys playing young and
Yeah,
getting good, but there is a proliferation of guys our age that have not only started very young, but I feel like a lot of guys in our little circle are very serious about it. Not that we were like overly studious and didn't love it or something, but that we had a real like sense of this is what we were meant to do, and we treated really with a lot of respect and seriousness. So I think you'll find a lot of guys our generation just like really worked really hard at it because we loved it a lot, and that's why 20 plus years down the road now, almost 30, we're all still doing this for a living. You know what I mean? Because we
yeah,
treated it that way.
absolutely, man, absolutely. And also, and I think you and I know me and Kirky have talked about this to a certain extent, and I think you and I have talked about this as well. But there's also, like being sort of like late Generation X and early millennial. There's this weird point in time where, you know, I even growing up in a gigantic city like Chicago, I didn't have other kids that were into what I was into. And I have like distinct memories of like being in grammar school and being obsessed with, whatever I was obsessed with
Right.
musically. And like all the other kids were like into Green Day. And I was like, I hate this shit, like I can't like I like and just being like I can't get behind, you know, like I dug Nirvana, I dug the Red Hot Chili Peppers, I certainly dug hip hop. I dug Wu-Tang Clan and I dug Public Enemy and all that. But it's like, as far as contemporary music of the time, but it was just like funny, man. Like I could even in contemporary music, I was like, 7 years old, like thinking Dookie was
Yeah.
like garbage, like, and everybody was obsessed with it. And it's weird because there's this like faction in music, like generationally, where it was, I was kind of like an island, much like yourself and others. And I feel like millennials, like maybe, 5 to 8 years removed, like it wasn't that way. Like all of a sudden you had
You're
little
right.
clusters,
You're right.
and
When I talk to guys a little bit younger than us, they seem to have a more common story of finding a group of guys their age that they started playing with very young. And you're right.
yeah,
I never had that. Like I was forced to
yeah,
find older guys to play with in turn, I would say probably pushed me further down the path I was already on anyways of blues and jazz and that kind of music because that's what they liked. And I was heading there anyways, but maybe if I would have found some young guys to play with, I would have, changed the things I was listening to. But yeah, they just weren't around. When I first met Derek Trucks, it was like a revelation to meet someone else my age who was like me, and it felt that
yeah,
way
yeah.
when we met, and it was like, wow, this is like this is okay. There's other people my age who do this, who love it, who want to do it, and that's the thing I always talk to him about every time I see him, which is not often. Man, isn't it crazy that 30 years later, we've come out the end of this, and we're both, you've had a different success doing your thing, but we're both still professional musicians. Even just that is amazing. In the end, to me, I think it's
No
crazy.
doubt.
Yeah.
No doubt. No doubt at all, man. But that is a weird generational thing. And but then, I mean, I guess, for me, that it changed the most when I moved to Nashville. I was 20 when right before I turned 21, I moved to Nashville. And I starved my ass off for a year, and I'm lucky as a mofo that it was a year and not 10 years or 5 or 6 years. But the first year, I mean, I was starving, and it was, but once I started working and things started kind of upticking for me, like it was then that I, for the first time, really, really like started working with guys my age, like on different instruments and so on and so forth. Like, especially when I started doing sessions and stuff like that, it was, there was a group of guys that were like all of a sudden my age, or there'd be one or two cats, that were my age that were on the session. And there's a bond there because it's like, oh man, we're the young guys coming up, and that was really cool. It was great to not be a, a unicorn anymore.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't know
So
about you, but like I always younger when I was, and I tell this to young guys all the time when they ask. Of course, it's not like I walk around, offering unsolicited advice, because we know what that feels like, right? We've had unsolicited advice yelled at us since we were freaking 8 years old,
yeah.
and but uh the when I was 13, 14 years old, I couldn't wait to be older. I didn't want to be like, the phrase, oh man, he's so good for his age,
Yeah.
was like, no, I don't want to be good for my age. I want to be good. I just
Yeah.
want to be good. Like, I hated being like, I didn't like that. Like, I couldn't wait to get to the point that age didn't factor into it. Like, cause I just wanted to be a guy, and, and that's and that's the thing where it's like all of a sudden one day nobody cares. It's like you're not the young kid anymore, and it's like, all right, what do you got?
Mhm.
And I couldn't wait for that day. I'm not sure that that's a mutually exclusive feeling, but I, for mine, like I couldn't wait for it, and I'm sure you're probably the same in that, where it's like man, I just want to be a cat, you know
Yeah, I just wanted, number one, I didn't care really about anybody outside of musicians. All I wanted was musicians to treat me
yeah, yeah,
not like a kid. You know what I mean? That
yeah,
was
yeah,
most important to me.
totally.
Yeah.
Totally, totally,
Uh,
totally, man.
dude, so
He's
okay, so
so
you're in
he's so good
Chicago.
for his age. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. All right, so you're in Chicago. You take lessons a little bit. By the way, what was the first guitar?
It's I have it in the other room. It's a little uh nylon string acoustic guitar. It was
Yeah.
like maybe a $60 thing, and that was my guitar that I played for a couple of years. And then I got a little travel guitar, electric guitar, and that was my first electric guitar. And actually my daughter has it now. I gave it to my daughter, and those are my guitars then. And then I had a I don't know, I might still have it, but I had then there was like a copy Strat that I got when I was 7 or something, and that was like the first full size. And then I remember saving up my gig money to buy my first Fender, and I bought like a Mexican Strat when I was probably 8 or something, and it was like, to have Fender on the headstock was like a big freaking deal, I remember
Yeah.
that. But that was,
That's a pretty
yeah,
similar progression to what I had. I had a little nylon string acoustic, real small. Then I
yeah,
had a small electric that looked like a Strat, but it was literally like so small. Had one pickup,
yeah, yeah, yeah,
red.
yeah.
Uh, then my first full size guitar was an acoustic. So I went acoustic, electric, acoustic, like a regular steel string acoustic. Then I got, I think then I got a Charvel. Was my first like big
Hmm.
electric. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, crazy. Yeah.
yeah, yeah. No, and
All
then it
right,
goes,
so
and then it goes from there.
well, yeah, and it never ends. So okay, so
Yeah.
before you go to Nashville, what are like those, your teen years in Chicago like? You're playing gigs. I know, in Chicago, it's probably a little tougher to get around in winter and things like that, going to gigs by yourself. So I'm assuming your parents were taking you to these gigs?
They were, and what happened that actually helped me the most is we actually, as a family, relocated to Phoenix, Arizona when I was 13,
Okay.
and um, that aided the whole situation immensely, because the other thing, as you well know and remember, being underage trying to play in clubs is a nightmare in big cities. And there's you're kind of at the mercy of if they're going to be cool with it or not, and so us relocating to Phoenix helped immensely because things were so much laxer there, man. And I
Hmm.
was able to play every weekend and not have problems. But yeah, my parents would kind of pull duty and take me to the gigs, much like yours and lots of other our friends. And that, you know, that happened. I mean, I was 12, 13, and it was like became the regular thing where it would be every weekend. And I hated school.
Yeah.
And I couldn't, I had a bad attitude, man. I was real, my attitude was very much, I know what I freaking want to do, let me go do it. And in retrospect, it's like I want to like slap the shit and be like, you know what, you have some respect and you be a good, because it's like I had a real bad attitude. And but youth is wasted on the young, as they say. And so I was doing that, and then I actually, I dropped out of school when I was 15 and went on the road full time, and like, you know, left, and that was that. And I lived in vans, touring around with people, both doing my own shows some, and then also playing in a host of, I mean, as you have as well, I mean, just lots of bizarre stories. I played in like a Tejano, like a bunch of like Mexican gangster type band called Barrio Latino. I played in that band, and we had some crazy times in California and throughout the Southwest. My first time to Hollywood was playing in that band, and that's a really, really, I mean, it's like a Tarantino movie. Like that, my first 36 hours in Hollywood was crazy. It was just full of drugs and
Wow.
gangsters and stuff. It was crazy. And I played in that band. I played in a couple other bands. There was a guy named Danny Rhodes. I played in his band for a long time, and he grew up with Michael Rhodes. And Danny had a band in the 80s here in Nashville called The Nerve, which was like a studio cat like band here. And so that actually, some of those relationships helped when I moved to Nashville eventually, playing with Danny all those years. But yeah, man, I just, I was a bad boy. I dropped out of school at 15 and went on the road, and basically, toured all over the country for $20 or $120 and everywhere in between, and sleeping on floors and so on and so forth, until I decided I was going to move, permanently to another place, either Austin or Nashville. And I chose Nashville because I had one friend that I could crash with. That was my deciding factor.
Right.
So I moved here in '06.
Man, and that's, I mean, I don't think people quite realize, number one, how important sometimes just making a leap of faith move like that is to ending up where we end up, as professionals.
Right.
But also how fucking scary it is. It's like, when I moved here to LA, I had just married Nikki, my wife, and I had no idea what I was going to do. I was 22
Yeah.
years old, and it was like, okay, let's get in a truck and drive all the way from Florida to California, and just, I'll figure it out. I had to get a day job, which is still the only one I ever had. And it's like, yeah, it's like a giant leap of like belief in yourself, but it's super scary.
Totally, man. Totally. And everybody wants to believe that they don't have to do those things too. I know I didn't. I can remember, like, every big thing that was difficult and really hard. Like, you want to believe that like there's like, I call it the lottery system, that like everybody wants to believe that, oh, there's just one thing that's going to happen, and it's just you're going to win the lottery, and it's all going to change overnight. And it's like, no, that's not how it works. Not even not for anyone. There's always the same. The circumstances and what surrounds things might be different, but the actual act of one foot in front of the other, and doing really, really difficult things, and just getting used to the concept of being terrified and doing things you're not used to. The quicker you can kind of get right with that, I think the happier you'll be, because that never changes. I remember, just to kind of exemplify that point, I remember I was hanging, this is a long time ago, probably 20 years ago. I was hanging um, backstage with an artist that I happened to know. And it was, he was getting ready to go out and play like a huge shed, like the Hollywood Bowl or something. We were on his bus,
Mhm.
and uh, and he was nervous about, is it full? Is the house full? Is it like, what's the crowd look like out there? Like, he was nervous. It was like, dude, there's 25,000 people out there. Like, even then, even at that level, he's nervous about how many people are there. Like, and I was just like, I don't know why that's stuck in my mind, but like, it never goes away. Whether you're hoping 100 people show up or whether 25,000 people are showing up, like, it's all, we're all insecure, and we all kind of, I mean, put it this way, I make this joke all the time, but it's like, if you like do this, if you have like the need to do this, meaning like play music, express yourself, like perform in front of other people, like invest tons of your innermost, like close feelings and expressions for other people then to judge, like, there's something wrong with you. There's something that like went wrong early. Like, we're messed up, like, we to have that need is kind of not normal. So it's like whatever you can do to kind of circumvent the normal kind of craziness. I mean, there, as I say, there's help groups that can help us. And it's like, the older you get, it's like, I find more and more people, as Mark Maron says, more and more of us in these secret society meetings that are all Zoom nowadays, because it helps.
It does.
So
It does help, man. And so okay, so when you get to Nashville, was your plan? I mean, you probably didn't even have one, but was it mostly
no.
make a living as a guitar player by any means necessary, or had you already kind of thought? I know you were doing some of your own stuff anyways in Phoenix, but was it like do more of my own stuff when I get to Nashville, or was it more like I'm just going to make a living as a guitar player?
It was both. I didn't know what the hell I was doing. I was 20 and I didn't know what the hell I was doing. So I mean, I certainly tried to get something going on my own, and, went into Warner Brothers, went into Capitol Records, did the showcases, and was the show pony, and had a bunch of near misses, and um, you know, had a bunch of, development deals offered that thank God I didn't sign, because they would have robbed me of years of my life, and other things wouldn't have happened. And those were tough. I mean, those are hour-long conversations about those things. But it's like, I tried anything and everything. It was complete scramble of like whatever I can do to survive. And eventually, I mean, I was completely out of money. I was out of, I was, I couldn't get anything going. I couldn't get a gig. I couldn't get anything. And then I tell the story, and it's completely true, where it's like, I went down on the street corner, down on Broadway, and played on the street corner to see if I could make some money, because I was behind on my rent, and I didn't have enough money for groceries. And so, um, which is a really melodramatic freaking thing to do, by the way. It's like, I could have just gone to Starbucks and got the job, but it's like, no, in my melodramatic head, I'm like, no, this is it, man. I mean, it's totally like, it's like a Saturday Night Live skit or something. It's like, my life is over. I'm going to go play on the street corner. But again, I'm a kid, I'm 20 years old and I don't know anything. So, but thank God I went and played on the street corner, because my friend Dave Rowe, who's a great bass player, walked by and said, "What the hell are you doing?" And I told him the truth. I said, "I'm fucked," and he said, "Well, come in here and meet Don Kelly." And I didn't know who Don Kelly was. But I walked in, and there's freaking Guthrie Trapp, in all his glory, like at
Right.
his most refined point. He'd been in Don's band for, like 5 years at that point. So it's like, he was a complete assassin. Not that he's not now, but I mean, it's like,
Right. Yeah. Right.
you do that gig 5-6 nights a week, 4 hours a night for 5 years. I mean, you are a sniper. Um, and I was like, fuck, I can't do this, but I was desperate. So, because I'd never played country before,
Right.
uh, and so, you know, it's a much longer story, but essentially, I finally got to audition for Dawn a few weeks later, which meant that I got up and sat in, and I woodshedded like I never had woodshedded before, up until that point, and and I did well enough that Dawn had me play that following week, and I was a sub for about a 6-month period. And that 6 months, I mean, I've never worked harder. I've never worked harder as a musician, because I was trying to scale Mount Olympus. And then eventually Don gave me the gig, and that work continued. I mean, it was until I was in that band for about 2 years solid, I didn't feel a sense of continuity or consistency in my playing. Like, it was just a moment to moment, like, you suck, you suck, you suck, you so suck. Oh, you're gonna get fired. Like, it was really fucking stressful, but it was good, because I learned a lot through that, how to persevere, and also, more importantly, like, how to fall down constantly and get back up.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, by the time I left that band, I mean, like, it stays with you, like nothing fucking scares me anymore, because, like, in the time of that band, I had to learn how to compartmentalize fear in a way that is absolutely immeasurable. Like, whether it's fear of screwing up, or I mean, I tell these stories all the time, and I'm sure you can relate, like playing at the Baked Potato and stuff like that too, that it's like every single night somebody heavy was in there, like every night it would be like, oh, Nora Jones is here with Smokey Hormel, or T-Bone Burnett is here with Jay Belleros, or James Burton is up top with Paul Lime, or Reggie Young used to come every couple months or so and sit right in front of me all night long, like 6 feet from me, and it's like, you get used to pressure, you get used to how to deal with it, all that kind of stuff, which goes even beyond like how to play, like all the other stuff.
Hmm.
So anyway,
Well,
so
plus, I mean, the overlooked part too is just the sheer amount of hours, the practical application you got on that gig.
yeah,
I mean, it's so many, just the process of getting your shit together, getting on stage, being a professional that many times for that many hours, so much can't be replaced. And for you to be doing it in a music that maybe at first wasn't something that was 100% your bag, that you had spent all your time learning, that, dude, it drives you so
absolutely.
much. So yeah, I can relate to, like, you were working so hard on kind of doing the homework, making sure you did a good job, keeping the gig, being professional, all that stuff. It's like when I first got to LA, I had no idea what it meant to play with anybody other than myself. That was all I had done, was play
Hmm.
blues and done my own music, and it was like when I started going on the road with other musicians is when I felt like I became a real professional, because I was playing music that not that I didn't care about, but that was not mine, and I had to do more
Right.
homework than I'd ever done, and all of a sudden you start to feel like a real adult professional.
Totally. No, absolutely, man. And it's it's a crazy thing, man. I mean, there's so many, as if, being a musician isn't a minefield of psychological, as I keep saying, like psychological, like, problems. Like, there's so much to it. So but no, it was an amazing thing. I'm sad. Early during the pandemic, Don announced that he was finally retiring after 33 years, man.
That's crazy.
33 years of 6 gigs a night. And when I was there for 6 years, nearly 6 years, five and a, we'll call it 5.5. And there were only 3 instances. There was one time when he was too sick to be there. One time, one night, there was one time where he actually went on a bit of a vacation and he missed Wednesday and Thursday night. He was there for the weekend. Okay. And there was one other time that he was sick. Okay. In my 5.5 years. So that's like a total of 4 nights he missed, that just in my tenure. Like, I mean,
Yeah.
it's crazy, man. And but the thing that I'm sorry about is I'm sorry that more people won't get to learn from the experience, because as we know, those types of scenarios become fewer and fewer. And what was probably the most special about that environment is the fact that Don, being this really, really old school James Brown, Ray Charles-esque General Patton band leader, it's there's something that does to you. Like, not saying that I treat my people like this, but when you're a kid and you think that you're fucking great and you're not, having somebody to yell and scream at you and like to say that he humbled me is an understatement, because Don is not impressed with anybody except Jimmy Vaughn. Like, Jimmy Vaughn is his favorite guitar player, and it's like he is completely unimpressed and unfazed by anything. And so it's like, like doing something that he thinks is good means the world, because he hates everything. So
Sure.
there's something about working in that environment, that it does make a man out of you, and I certainly entered that scenario a hell of a lot cockier than I left it. I learned a lot. I learned a lot of humility in that gig for many different reasons. And I'm sorry that more kids won't get to go through it, because it really, God almighty, yeah, man.
Yeah. Yeah.
I think more kids need to get yelled at. No.
Yeah, I mean, dude, I'm grateful for the times that, drummers would tell me, hey, your time isn't happening yet. This is what I need from you. Or when a guitar player would tell me, that's not helping what you're playing while I'm singing there. I need you to play in this register or do this, or like all those little things that, as a kid, you maybe can you have two choices. It's like you get upset and go off into your little shell because you can't handle constructive criticism, or you soak that shit in and it makes you
Yeah.
better like overnight. And that's was all I cared about, was how do I get better tomorrow than today. If I make a mistake on
Right.
stage and they tell me about it, I'll never make that mistake again, ever. Yeah.
Totally.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Absolutely, man.
Yeah. Did you know, I mean, obviously, you didn't really know the history of that gig before you stepped into it. You just walked in there and
No.
saw Guthrie playing, and
Yeah.
so that's its own thing. Like seeing somebody play like that, and he's such a great player. But like, then
Yeah.
you learn about the lineage of the guys who have done that gig. Um, it's got to be like a little bit of, yeah. You had to have a I can't fuck this up feeling a little bit.
Huge. Yeah. No, big time. And it was a little different, you know, um, it everything around Broadway and that gig changed, while I was there.
Yeah.
And when Daniel Donato took my place, it was already kind of like too touristy and too mainstream. Like, I'm really grateful that I got to experience the last little bit of when it was busy, but it was like it truly was a mixture of tourists and people from town, because producers and other musicians and like people from the newspaper and all that stuff would go down there to grab a beer and a burger and see who was playing with Don. And by the time I was leaving, that wasn't the case anymore, because it was just too crazy. It was way too Bourbon Street. Um,
Yeah. Yeah. That's
and uh, and so I'm really grateful that I got to experience that element of it, because it really was like um, a very old school type of environment, that it was, you were surrounded by uh heavy people. And that was, obviously really helpful to, start a career and all that kind of stuff. But it was also just to have experienced that. I mean, it'll never be like that again, and I'm grateful for that. And I'm sure you have this feeling yourself, that it's like, as students of history, it's continually amazing to me to like stop for a second and realize that like history is happening right like as you're going through it, you know? And it's like I look at that and it's like, wow, man. I mean, because it was tight, man. Like, looking up and it's like, God, there's James Burton up there hanging out, and Dan and Patrick from the Black Keys at the bar having a burger. I mean, it was, it'll never happen again like that.
Yeah.
And and it was, because it was, everybody wanted to see there was a time that everybody wanted to see who was playing in Don's band, mostly the guitar player, but whoever was playing in that band, because it was a coveted slot. It was the best in town gig you could have in town, from a paying perspective, and also like a feature perspective. And yeah, once I learned what I was dealing with, no, I tried to block that out as best I could, but it was an epic fail. I mean, it was tough. It was really hard. And that's another thing. But here's another tiny little nugget here. You know, for the first year, no matter how good of a night I had, which now granted, I mean, in my mind, it took me about 2 years to grow into that gig where I had some level of consistency. That's what I remember, but I could be wrong with that. But it's like, at least for the first year or so, a couple of hundred a night of "Where's Guthrie?" Like, and the funny thing is that I'm talking to Guthrie after about it. That's what Guthrie went through, of "Where's Johnny Hyland?" And Johnny Hyland going through "Where's Red Volkart?" and Red Volkart going through "Where's Troy Lancaster?" and Troy Lancaster going through "Where's Kenny Vaughan?" and Kenny Vaughan going through where's Brent Mason or whatever. So I mean, it's like, but even that, like, getting used to where that doesn't phase you, because at a certain point it doesn't phase you, because you've literally been pissed on enough that you're just like, whatever, doesn't matter, I'm just gonna do my gig. And it's so funny though, man, like all the psychological, like, it's not a surprise that like all of us have like both a deep wounded like sense of like trauma, like a PTSD that'll never leave us,
Mhm.
but also all the positive elements, because
Well,
it's
dude, I
crazy.
remember from the outside, the first time I saw that gig when I was a kid in Nashville. I was on tour. We were in Memphis doing something, then we went to Nashville for a gig, and I went on an off night, and I saw Johnny do the gig.
Yeah,
And so of course
yeah,
I was blown away. I'm a huge Danny Gatton fan. I'd love to see Johnny, whatever. And then the next time I went back, Guthrie was on the gig, and I felt like, where the fuck is Johnny Island? You know what I mean?
yeah, of
Like,
course,
who's this guy? I never
yeah.
heard of this guy. So yeah, it is. That's a weird. I've never been in that situation, following in a chair that's like the band stays and you were just replacing a revolving door of chair. That had to be interesting. But also, like you said, being in that world as a kid, you had access to guys who were working in the other side in Nashville that started to maybe fill out your Rolodex, right? And start calling you for sessions and things like that.
Yeah, and it was a gradual, I mean, it was really great, because it was a real gradual stair step. It was never like, by the time I did like some, my first big like, A team session stuff, I was really ready for it, because in the beginning it's all custom projects, going to people's houses, all this kind of stuff where you're learning how to, you're learning how to record, you're learning how to read a chart, you're learning how to come up with a part while you're listening to the demo for the first time.
Yep.
You're learning how to do it in one or two takes. And there's definitely, as there's a muscle to that. And that, you do that for a while, you do a whole bunch of those. And then, got into doing publishing work for Warner Chappell and Universal and all that, were, going in and playing on, pro sessions or whatever, but for songwriter demos, for all the big publishing companies. And, then you start working with some bigger players, and then all of a sudden, Ted Hewitt was a big producer, and Paul Worley, another big producer, were the first two big producers that called me to work. And by the time that happened, I mean, I was nervous, but by the time that happened, I was really used to it and I knew how to do it. And so then it was just get in there and do a good job. And yeah, I mean, it was crazy. I mean, cause it was a solid, 3-4 years, of, once I got into doing it, doing sessions most days and then going to play with Don at night, so it's like, again, you're just so. And the other thing, this is another thing I'll say about Don's band. Don's band, from a technical standpoint, is so fucking difficult that sessions were so easy, because what was called of me on the Don gig was 400 million times harder and more taxing than anything that would ever get thrown at me on a mainstream session. Like, I mean, it was just like, it's akin to being like Olympian, like weightlifting, and then being asked to like go for a brisk walk for someone, like it was just like, there was absolutely no, it's not like I was ever asked to do anything on any of those sessions that was even, because I know it's still, I mean, Don never had a set list. There were hundreds of songs, literally hundreds of songs that he would call from. You never knew what he was going to call next, like it was, I never knew what the hell. And he might call something that I didn't know, or something that's particularly really difficult. And he would turn around and he would hum you the head that he wants you to play or something like that. And, T-Bone Burnett might be standing right in front, that it's like, oh God, now I got to do this. And I don't know what the hell I'm doing. And so-and-so is 2 feet in front, so again, like sessions, it was a piece of cake compared to playing with Don.
Before you started doing sessions in Nashville, had you ever done any sessions for anyone other than yourself, like your own music?
Yeah, I had, actually. When I was 17, 18, 19 years old in Phoenix, I did, what little there was in Phoenix when I would come home from touring with people, playing on stuff for radio commercials and stuff like that. So I had a little bit of experience, but nothing compared to, when you're in LA, New York, Nashville, like, I had no idea, how the system really worked, but I'd done a little bit. So
Yeah, because that was a rude awakening for me. Like, I'd only times I'd ever even been in studios until I moved here was to record my own music. You know what I mean? So
yeah,
it was like,
yeah,
like you said, it's a different muscle. Like learning how to start hearing an idea the second they play you the rough while you're making your own chart, and knowing what you're going to play and coming up with parts and tones and all that stuff. That was like, yeah, very incremental process over the course of, sessions at people's homes, little sessions, here. And then next thing you know, by the time you get to a big session, you're prepared for it. Yeah.
yeah, no. And so it's cool. And then, and as you know, I mean, the most fun, the thing that I miss the most, about that life, is the camaraderie with the other players. I miss, because you get paired, as you get paired with certain people because you seem, like people view you having a chemistry with this particular rhythm section or that particular rhythm section. Or in my case, it was like there were like I used to get paired with Dan Dugmore a lot on steel and other guitar because we played well together. And so I'd work with Dan a lot, Russ Paul a lot, that kind of thing. And I miss that, you miss the lunches, you miss the hanging with the guys, and not to mention, I mean, it's like, I remember like the first time I was on a record with Matt Chamberlain on drums, and they'd flown Matt in from LA. And, for a kid who was not cool in high school, in school. I was very uncool. Like that feeling of like finally being like a cool kid, you know, like because I remember like Matt was super cool with me. We worked on a few things together, but like I remember like, you know, like I have this memory of like the first time I was working with Matt and I was sort of laying low, which is was generally how I would avoid stepping in shit in environments that were high stress. I would just lay low and keep my head down and do a good job. But anyway, there's another musician on the another older 18 musician that we both know on the session who is a big politicker, and he was trying to like hang with Matt and like politic with him and all that, and like Matt like understood what he was doing, and I remember Matt like going, "Hey JD, man, you want to go get lunch?" You know, and being like, oh, "You want to go to lunch with me?" being like, being like, "Oh man, I've been picked. I'm cool all of a sudden." You know, like there's that element of it that's like really that I miss a lot. You know,
Oh
because
yeah.
there's some really groovy cats. You know,
It's always the hang. Not that I don't love the work. I like doing sessions, but it was always like, man, I can't recreate that feeling of, the first time you go to a session in LA and, Abe Jr.'s on drums or Vinny or,
yeah.
JR, guys like, or Neil Stubenhouse is on bass or Nathan East. It's like, whoa, this is fucking ridiculous. Like, and they treat you like, you know, yeah, maybe like a kid, but also like you belong. And it's like, wow,
Yeah,
this means a lot.
no, because
Yeah.
yeah, because if you're there, then somebody deemed you worthy to be there. So there's like, they don't, you know, like you once you're in the door, and especially when you get asked back, that's the other thing. Like
Yep.
when producers start using you and you start doing multiple stuff, that's the real thing. Getting your foot in the door is a one thing, but then
Yep.
actually going back again and again, like that's when it's like, you know, the ego likes that.
Yeah. So, so when along this process, playing with Don, doing sessions, growing up also, like becoming, being a real like responsible human being, an adult, starting to have relationships and, wanting to have different things, like maybe God forbid a home or a family and things like that. When do you start to think about, going back and doing your own thing like you are now? Like when was there a moment you remember where you needed to do it, or was it just very gradual?
No, there was a definitive moment, and what happened was is um I was like 26, about to be 27, and I finished a 2 o'clock session early, and it was like 3 o'clock, and I was so stoked. I was like, I'm gonna go home and chill out before I go to the gig, before I go to Don's gig that night. And I was so excited, like to have a day to go home and do whatever the hell I felt like doing. And in the meantime, we had moved, my wife and I met my wife the same year that I moved to Nashville. She's a Nashville native. Fell in love with her. We were inseparable. I was broke, she was broke. It was an amazing situation. We both became adults together. Um and she's my best friend, and we moved into the house that we're still in. And all of a sudden had a nice house and a nice neighborhood in this adult life. And I'm 25, 26 years old, and these are none of these things are things that I'd set out to have. um and so I was sitting at a freaking red light, man, and I was listening to NPR, and I love NPR, and I looked, and I was on 8th Avenue, the corner of 8th Avenue and Wedgwood. I'll never forget it, at the red light heading south. And I realized, I couldn't remember the last time I listened to music for pleasure. Like I was looking at NPR going, I have not sat and listened to an album or listened to music for pleasure. And I can't even remember. Like music has officially become my job. I am a plumber who happens to play guitar. And it was a real sobering, depressed moment. And, I didn't know what the solution was, but I knew I had to do something about it because it made me really unhappy. And the flip side of that also was a great life lesson, because I, still live a very frugal lifestyle. I don't really have vices, really. I don't have tons of equipment. I don't have, like I'm I'm not like a collector of anything. I'm very much kind of in the moment I'm in. I don't have that gene that some of our friends have, thankfully. And the I was like, okay, so I have money, I have security, I have all this kind of stuff, and I'm not happy. Okay, so it was a great life lesson of like, okay, none of those things are going to make me happy. So what do I got to do to be happy? And putting that out to the universe, several things happened. One was I got a call, or actually at the time it was a MySpace invite, and it was from an old friend of mine, Frank Swart, who was a great bass player who at the time was in John Hyatt's band and playing with Patty Griffin. And he's this weirdo bass player, and he had this band with Kenny Vaughan called Funk Wrench with this awesome drummer Adam Abershaw, and they played like sort of Bitches Brew era, like just complete free, where you show up and you just start improvising and that's the gig.
Okay.
And so he invited me to do a gig with him and Adam because Kenny couldn't do it, and I said sure. And so I'd never done that before. I'd never walked into a gig not knowing what we were going to play, knowing that we were just going to improvise for like hours straight without stopping. And it flipped a switch in me. I was like, I have to do this. This is what the rest of my life. I was like, this makes me happy. This is joyous. This is, I don't know how I'm going to do this, but this is what I'm going to do in some form or fashion. And so gradually we turned that into what became my, the group Simo. And, it started as like something that we were doing for our own sanity, sort of like guys do in LA, something that we would do once a month, or something. And then it got to, just over the course of like the next year and a half, it became more serious, where we started doing some regional shows, and then sort of expanding and going to Alabama or Georgia or Kentucky or whatever, and losing money, losing money that we didn't have to lose, but having a fucking great time. And then eventually, I took some savings I had, we made a record so that we could sell it at gigs, and eventually, and we had some cool stuff happen, like played Bonnaroo and a couple other things through friendships that I'd had in the music business, got our first agent, stuff like that. And inevitably Frank had to bow out because he couldn't do it. He had a family and he couldn't do it. And so right around that time is when we signed our first record deal. And that's when our friend Alad, young guy from Tel Aviv, joined on bass. And we there was another guy in the interim that I think is when we first met. Justin was playing with me, but when Alad joined, that's when things really kind of changed, because that's when we signed a record deal and it was like, we're doing this for real. And in 2016 alone, we did, I'm never doing it again, but we did, I don't remember what it was, but it was like 260 some shows that year. And I was gone 300 days. And that also will make a man out of you. It'll also drive you fucking insane too. And it was just that thing where it's like, we always have kept our overhead low. And just one thing has led to another with it. And up until the pandemic, I mean, we were out at least 200 if not more shows a year, and it was just always that thing of keeping our overhead low and going out there and grinding and having a great time, and it's just kind of, but I mean, in doing that, it's like, not only did I completely give up this session and side career, Um, you know, and that was a choice that I eventually had to make, and I made it, and it was a tough one. Um, but you know, for the longest time, you know, I had to make really tough decisions, and you know, me and Adam, you know, Adam still plays with me. He's my brother. You know, you know, we had to make a lot of tough decisions because there's so many gigs that you got to play that you know you're just going to lose money. And that's another kind of eventual thing that you just, you know, no one skips that step. You know, it's part of the equation. Um, you know, and then the joke is that you know you always want help. You always want, you know, whatever it is that you see the people around you have that you at least perceive other people to have. And the truth of the matter is that you know everybody kind of goes through the same thing, and it's that same thing with that lottery system. It's like everyone wants to believe that it's like, oh, that agent or that label or that management company or that publicist or whatever, and it's like, no, you just got to do the work, and you know, somehow or another it works out. You know, somehow or another, it's not that it's not going to be hard, because it is, but you know, I mean, I wouldn't change a thing. I mean, I really
Yeah.
am grateful for it all, and I've had a really great time, seen the world, seen the every nook and cranny of this continent, and you know, played what I felt like playing. It's been amazing, you
Yeah.
know.
And that's a rewarding thing, you know, even if it's for 20 people or 100 people, when you start doing that on the regular, playing your shit and people, any amount of people care about it, it like it feeds you in a way that nothing else can. And it makes you want to, like you said, lose money to do it, devote all your energy, your passion, your love. It makes it kind of okay to do that because of the feeling you get from, you know, doing that, you know, getting some sort of feedback from something that you've created and is the most personal to you. But yeah, it's super hard, and you end up with lots of shit or get off the pot moments where it's like, nope, I can't go on the road with you and make money right now because I have to keep doing this where I'm losing money. Or no, I can't do these sessions that week because I have 4 gigs that are going to just break even, you know, or whatever. There's a lot of those moments, and I struggle with that still now, you know what I mean? But it's the choices we have to make if this is what we want to do.
Yeah, and it, I mean, and also, I mean, it does get better. I mean, that's the thing. Like, I mean, it's sort of a self-fulfilling prophecy once you start to go down it, and it you know, I mean, that's the thing. I mean, it's just like anything. It's you're building a small business, you know, and so you know, no restaurant starts out packed, you
Mhm.
know, and I think you know the. Not that anybody's asking my advice or anything, but it's like, you know, my advice always is just, you know, be frugal, keep your overhead low, and you know, there's multiple different ways that you can ease the bleeding. Um, but usually, you know, it means continually kind of having to do a check on your own humility, you know. Um, and again, I mean, it's interesting because there's certain musicians that have become really, really close friends of mine. Um, like Luther Dickinson is a really close friend of mine, and Luther's a a working class musician. Um, you know, Luther always likes to say it's like there's the, you know, he's like there's us, man, the ones who are proud to own our vans and drive them. You know, like and there's something about that that is really kind of cool because most of you know our heroes. This is something that Luther and I talk about. So let me explain completely. So Luther and I joke about this all the time that um, no matter how much I kind of look into and study old heroes of mine, the amount of them, I love this, the amount of them that were janitors or worked in funeral homes is pretty much 80% or higher. And also, you know, for better or worse, you know, the majority of the people that I absolutely love, played in residency gigs, playing to 100 or less people. It's kind of weird when I look at it, but it's like even Muddy Waters, Howlin' Wolf, all the guys in Chicago, and I sort of pop this bubble on people all the time because it's like we imagine these people as like Mount Rushmore, but it's like, no, man. Muddy and Wolf and Otis Rush and all those guys, they would go home to Chicago and they would play a tavern from Wednesday through Sunday. And that was their weekly gig, how they paid their bills. And, they played more gigs in that environment than they did big concerts,
Absolutely.
and it's just, there's, and I'm saying all this to say this is that it's like, the Beatles played Shea Stadium with one roadie, riding in the back of a station wagon. Hendrix toured in station wagons with one roadie. Like the way that how we view success in the modern era with the buses and the techs and the this and the that and all that, it's a very different, we're kind of bombarded with this kind of false sense of what is really reality, because there's this kind of alternate reality that's been created, and not saying that that's a bad thing at all. It's just that it enforces this kind of negative, like, if you don't have these things, then you're doing something wrong. And that's just not reality, like it's because at the end of the day, all these things, whether it be what hotel you're staying at, how many people are on the road with you, how you're traveling, all that kind of stuff, you pay for that. So it's your decision how you're going to spend your money. You know what I mean? And there's a really great story that my buddy Pat Sweeney tells. Adam tells it too, because Adam was playing with Pat. Pat Sweeney is this great blues singer-songwriter from here, a great guitar player. And he grew up in Akron, Ohio. And Dan Arbach from the Black Keys was in his band. Like, he grew up playing in Pat's band. And Adam, my drummer, was also in that band. And so they go back. And I know Dan now. I've done stuff with Dan in modern times, but they grew up with him. When Brothers hit their biggest record, when Tighten Up became a #1 record, and they went from playing sort of 500 seat clubs, all of a sudden they're playing big amphitheaters, like within the span of 6 months. They had Pat come out and open a bunch of shows for them, like, hey buddy, we're making it, come on out, let's pay, we'll pay you good, we'll pay you $1,000 to get up and play and sell your merch and and it was, or whatever it is. And he said that the mental image that sticks in his head is showing up to whatever the first shed was that they were playing, and there's Dan and Pat getting out of a van, and they had 2 vans and a box truck with all the gear in it, in this huge 15,000 seat shed. And he asked him about it, and he was like, what's going on, man? And like, Dan was very matter of fact about it. He was like, what do you mean what's going on? And he's like, well, dude, you're happening, like, you're in a van. And he's like, Pat and I have starved for the better part of 10 years, and we're putting every dime in our pocket. And it was like, that's some hip, old school, that's some Bo Diddley shit right there, man. Like, that's some Chuck Berry shit. Like, it was just, like, he was like, things are happening, we're fine. Now, of course, they expanded, and eventually they did have buses.
Yeah, because you don't know then
kind of
if you'll ever make any money ever again. That might be the only money you'll ever make. Then maybe once it gets more consistent, you can change it a little bit.
Granted, but that's that. I just love that story because it's so hip. Because like so many people, it's like the second that they can do it, they do it.
Yeah,
and it's like that is just. That is just so hip, man. That's like so, like, Chuck Berry pulling up to the gig in his own car, like, give me my money in cash and let's do this.
And who cares if the band even knows my songs? Let's go.
Exactly. I'm Chuck Berry.
Yeah. Oh man. But everybody, what's interesting too is, like you said, everybody who does their own thing, so the way that we do, I guess, has a different definition of success and level of contentment. where they want to be, what feels comfortable to them, what's important to them, and that everybody kind of has to find their own path on that.
Sure. Absolutely, man. I just love doing it. It's
Like I
amazing.
don't care about
It's
being in a
fun.
bus, like you said. I'd be happy. I don't even own a van. I would love to own a van. I don't have enough gigs in this country to own a van. There's no reason for me to own a
So
van.
so no lie, no lie, and no lie. So I finally bought a brand new van in October of 2019. And I was so like, I was like, man, and it's a 2019 brand new, freaking went to Georgia because I saved like 4 grand by getting it down in Georgia. And like, I had the money and I was like, I'm gonna wait until the right one comes up. And
Right.
it took me months, and then I finally pulled the trigger on this thing, and it is like mint and beautiful and clean. And we used it, October, November. We took December of 2019 off, and then we were out on the road January, February of 2020, and then obviously the world ended. And it's
Yeah.
just funny because now it sits, and I have to make sure I drive it every week. I look forward to being able to beat the living piss out of it. You know what I mean? It's
Mhm.
like, I
I know
got it. I
exactly what
finally
you
got
mean.
it. But that
Yep.
sucker's sitting, and it's like, oh man, I ain't driven that in 4 days. I better drive that around town.
Oh man, crazy,
Oh gosh, yeah, man,
dude. Let's jump into the 10 questions.
you got it.
All right. So some of these are self-explanatory, and they've touched on a little bit during the course of our conversation, but most of these I'm
Absolutely.
curious about. Number
Mm.
one, when you started learning and playing guitar initially, what was the
Hmm.
first, not maybe lick, but the first thing you learned, and when you got it under your fingers, you kind of felt like, I can't believe I just figured this out. And it like set the hook, like when you figure out something you've listened to a million times and the inspiration hits, and that's it. There's no going back.
Well, let me get this so I can actually like explain it perfectly. I know it. I remember exactly. Um, it was Heartbreak Hotel by Elvis. And 1 second, let me grab this cable. by the by the by Thank you very much. Thank you very much. Special effects here with Josh Smith. But no, the thing that was cool about it is, I was sitting there forever trying to get it to sound right. And and then I finally figured out what was going on, and it's something that still is very much kind of a part of the way that I play. So what I was doing is super simple, but the that microtone bend at the end where he's bending an E flat into an E against an E on top, like, because I just was hearing it as, oh, he's playing an E, so it's like, you know, this is not right, you know. And it sort of started that whole thing of, when I learn something, I learn it, because it's like,
Right.
it's all those little things that people don't learn, which is why we have bad barroom versions of so many things, because it's like they learn like 80%. And it's like, no, man, it's that little thing that makes it, so yeah, no, I'll always remember that.
Nice.
So Heartbreak Hotel, Scotty Moore.
Nice, man.
Yeah.
Well, that might be the answer to number two then, which was, is that the first solo you ever learned, note for note?
That I can remember. Yeah, that I can remember. Absolutely. I was
Yeah.
just ate up with it. But uh yeah, I mean, probably I would also say like that scene in Blues Brothers with John Lee Hurd. That thing probably as well, I would say.
Yeah.
Around the same time.
Did you
So,
have?
because
Did your
that's what I was
mom?
into.
Do you have Blues Brothers on VHS or something? You rent it?
Yeah. Well, it was my older. Okay, so one of my stepsisters. I have three stepsisters and one stepbrother that are all like 20 years older than me,
Right.
and one of them, the youngest of those, Diane, she was like the wild child of my dad's first batch of kids, and she was obsessed with Saturday Night Live. So my obsession with all things SNL comes from her, and
Okay.
so like Blues Brothers, Animal House, Trading Places, Ghostbusters, all that stuff. All my obsession with all that kind of stuff came from her, and it was
Nice.
hers. And it's hilarious for me to think now, because like the amount of profanity and inappropriate shit, like now having a young child, like thinking that my daughter's 2 years old, and it's like I was two, like quoting Blues Brothers, and it's like, oh Jesus, man, no wonder I'm so fucking warped,
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's cool. Yeah, I remember seeing it vividly, probably around that age. My parents loved Blues Brothers. And you said
yeah,
Trading Places, that was like my dad's
yeah.
favorite. I saw Trading Places so many times as a little kid. Yeah.
Oh man, it's so good. It's so
Yeah.
good. First naked woman I ever saw.
Yeah. Yeah. I remember vividly that as well. In fact,
But like,
I remember showing it to my son when he was really young, having him watch, because he loved Coming to America. And I was like, "Oh, we got to watch
yeah.
Trading Places." And my wife was like, "He can't watch that yet," and I'm like, "It's fine." And watch Trading Places. Yeah,
Yep. And then food and rent. Food and rent aren't the only things that cost money
yeah,
around here. You
exactly.
sleep on the couch.
I just
Thank
remember
you, Jamie
watching
Lee.
Coming to America first with my son, and the bathing scene is within the first 5 minutes of the movie. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Totally, cat. Totally.
Yeah. Oh man,
Oh, it's funny.
the royal penis is clean, Your Highness.
Oh,
Meanwhile,
it's so good.
on an aside, please don't let them fuck up Coming to America. I wish they did not do part two, and I'm
Please.
mad that it's coming out. And I'm
No,
so nervous. It's a perfect movie, and I just don't want them to fuck it up.
and I'm nervous. I'm nervous because, man, Eddie Murphy, like, I love Dolomite. I think that was awesome. I think he did
Yeah,
a great job. But Eddie Murphy is not the Eddie Murphy of 20 years ago, let alone 30 years ago, let alone 35 years ago. Like, he is this weird alien now. You even like see, like, he sits different. His facial
yep,
expressions are different.
yeah.
Like aliens took Eddie Murphy in like the mid 90s, and he is like some Borg or something now. Like, it's troubling to think. Like, as much as I enjoyed when he came back to SNL a year ago, it was cool. But even that, it was like,
Yep, I'm
there's
with
like,
you.
it's his manic switch got flipped off or something. It's like, no, man, where's the, like, something happened. Like,
I'm with you. And Eddie is
took,
our generation's guy. You know what I mean?
yeah,
It's like
totally, man.
when last year when the Eddie Comedians in Cars with Coffee came out with
Yeah,
Seinfeld, I was so hyped to see him just have a normal conversation and be funny.
yeah,
And it took him a while, even in that where they edit it, to warm up to where he started to be kind of funny and just regular with Jerry. It was
yeah.
weird.
There's
Yeah.
a, there's a really great, I know we can rabbit hole here, but I'll just say this. There's a really great podcast that John Landis, the director of Coming to America and
Yeah.
Animal House and Blues Brother, all that,
Yeah.
he said that when he did Beverly Hills Cop 2 with Eddie, which is a long time ago now,
That's
he
a
said
long
that
time
Eddie
ago.
was Eddie was already starting to change. And he said that Eddie was already getting to this point where he was like perverse enough in his own mind to not be funny, like on purpose,
Mm.
that like that entire movie, he said it was terrible because there'd be all these setups, and it's like Eddie would come up to the setup and then he would like walk around it, and it would be like, what is wrong with you? And it's like,
Crazy.
it's like he got to a certain point and it's like, I don't know. He's like, nope, not doing it. I'm
Yep.
Eddie. I'll do what I want.
Yep.
So it's like, come on. So anyway,
Yep.
but we
Well, we'll
digress.
see. We'll see how it goes.
Yeah.
All right. Number 3. What's the first thing you play every time you pick up a guitar? Do your hands just go somewhere without thought?
Oh man, that's a really good question. Everybody does that, don't they? All of us got it. It's changed over time. lately, the last couple of years, it's sort of like sort of a Lightning Hopkins kind of thing. That's just kind of where my hands go. Um, but that it's been other things over the years, but
Mhm.
lately it's been that. It's that Lord. That kind of turnaround thing is where my hands
Nice.
normally go these days.
Mine's
I
changed
don't know
over the
why.
years too, because it used to be I would flip standby on the amp, and the same thing. At first I just raked the strings, and then the same thing would come out every time. So much so that guys in different scenarios would be parroting it back to me because they knew I
Yes,
was about to
yes,
play it. So I had to
yes.
change.
Oh, you know what? Here's another thing. I do this to see if I'm in tune. Where I'm like listening to see if things are that
Yeah.
thing. I do that a lot too, and it's me trying to hear quickly if things are out of tune or not.
Yep.
So
Exactly. We all have those
yeah,
little things. Same thing like when you walk into a music store and you want to see if a guitar has it or not. What's the first thing you play to
yeah,
kind of check that guitar? We all got those little
yeah,
things, you know. Yeah. Yeah.
totally, man.
Right.
That's a
All right.
good one. I like that, Josh.
All right. Number 4. What key, style, song, groove, feel? Maybe it's Lightning Hopkins. Do you kind of have running in the background a lot of the time? Like I notice without fail, if I'm not listening to music, that normally I'm hearing some sort of shuffle or swing, syncopated dotted eighth note thing, like some sort of triplets. Normally in B flat, I'm just hearing that always, as if it's BB King or Charlie Parker or Wes Montgomery. But that's what I'm hearing all the time. Do you have something that just comes in and like that all the time?
Yeah, I do. And again, it changes. But for the last, there's three that are kind of like when I'm sitting by myself with a guitar. There's like three things that I'll go to, like kind of inherently. And one is like I've gotten during the quarantine in particular. I've just become so obsessed with hill country stuff and Junior Kimbrough in particular, and that sort of mid-tempo hip hop sort of that sort of just nod your head kind of thing. That is really, really. I was losing my shit last night too because Daft Punk just did a remix of one of his tunes,
Oh wow.
and it came out a couple of days ago, and it's so great. Like they took like five of his tunes and did a remix together where they kind of go in
Interesting.
and out, and it's so well done. But that has become a really, really big, like just kind of where my natural head is, and it's because I'm so deep into that music. And another is like the last year in particular, like Fela, like I never did a full deep dive into Afrobeat, and I just completely got lost in it during the pandemic. And so that sort of, or what? Where am I? That kind of thing is really kind of like as far as two things. And then last but not least, you know, and so key wise, like usually the Junior Kimbrough thing is in G because he played in G most of the time. So
Hmm.
it's like that's usually G. With the Afrobeat stuff, it's usually some variant of E minor or A minor. But then my normal like go to key is actually C sharp, and it's it's
Yeah.
just it's immediately BB, you
Yep.
know. So like those three things, I know that's not one, but it's like those are between those three.
Yeah.
It's like I do these things on Instagram where I play in the bathroom,
Hmm.
and the amount of those that I'm like, all right, what do I want to play on this thing today? The amount of like, it's another Junior Kimbrough, it's another Afrobeat, or it's another variation of. It's like, all right, let's. What else can I do?
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Nice.
So
Cool.
yeah.
I like all those. All right. So number 5 is about finding your own voice, and I'm curious. You, I think, like me, have had periods of, where certain things take over, and you're into this, you're into
Yeah.
that, you're into that, and then all of a sudden you kind of start realizing they've melded into something that's yours. And
Mhm.
for me, I remember it being like very intentional. Like at some point realizing, hey, I'm not saying anything. I need to make every left turn I can. That when
Mhm.
I play something that feels like mine, I'm gonna go further that way. Did you kind of ever
Mhm.
feel that? Or was it just totally natural? And when do you feel like maybe you started to have a voice that was yours?
Just the last couple of years, honestly. There was a point a few years ago, in 2000, was it 16 or was it 17? It was in 2016. So that crazy year that I mentioned where we were gone 300 days, and it really, I mean, the band broke up as a result of it because it was just too much, and we were at each other. By the time we got done with that year, we hated each other. Like Adam and I didn't hate each other, but like it was heavy, man. And that's why the band broke up. And we it was about halfway through that year. um I just got sick of everything I was doing. I was just sick in general. I was just, it was that thing where it's like, it was May and we'd already done like 130 gigs. It was like,
Sure.
I was burnt. And so I remember we got home from Europe and we had like 2 days off. And then we were starting another tour in Louisville. The tour started in Louisville, I remember. And, I was using the Marshalls, and that first phase of the band was very like 60s, Marshalls rock, Cream, into all that. And I was just so sick of it. And I recognized that, like, what my rig and what I was sort of like doing was so pointed in a very specific direction that I had a lot of love for and all that, but I was over it. I was like, this is someone else. This isn't me. And if I'm going to make it through, the next 7 months, I need to figure out a way to enjoy it and be inspired. Otherwise I'm just going to go crazy. And, and so what happened is I got home from that tour and I pulled out my old deluxe reverb that I'd used for the entire time I was in the Don Kelly band. And it was also my main studio amp. I pulled that out. My old 335, I hadn't had this for 4 or 5 months because Gibson had it. And so I went and picked this up from the custom shop, and I pulled that deluxe reverb out, and we left for that next tour. And that was what I brought. And everybody was like, what the hell is where's the Les Paul? Where's your Marshalls? Like, are you crazy? And I was like, no, this is what I'm doing. And it was a very distinctive thing of like, I don't want the sound that immediately comes out to point me in a direction. I just want it to be kind of neutral and
Mm-hmm.
open. And it's like, you know, it can be whatever it is that ends up happening. And so that was a very definitive change on my part. And then I got a microphonic tube. So hold on a second. Let me turn that off. It's going behind my head. The So that was a very distinctive thing. And since then, it's just been uh, just a journey of just a little bit of this, a little bit of that, a little bit of this, a little bit of that, and I definitely have distilled down that from a psychedelic standpoint, I personally am more like eternally inspired by guys like Eddie Hazel from Funkadelic, and my man Michael Tolles, who played with Isaac Hayes. He actually signed my guitar down here. And guys like Craig McMullen, who played with Curtis Mayfield, that sort of like using fuzz and wah-wah, like psychedelic, but within a soul R&B world, not so much the white rock sort of thing. And then obsession with old like very, very like Earl Hooker, I just became enamored with Earl Hooker's slide playing because initially my slide playing was heavily influenced by Dwayne Allman, and I love Dwayne Allman, but man, I just fell in love with Earl, and I've just never looked back. And so, like, whenever I play slide, it's sort of I'm kind of coming from that, and yeah, now here lately, I mean, it's just a lot of hill country, a lot of Junior Kimbrough, a lot of Afrobeat, and a lot of like cleaner guitar player, like really heavy obsession with Leo Nocentelli from the Meters, and heavy influence of like Catfish Collins, and sort of like putting
Mhm.
all that together. And so, for me, it's more about like kind of picking some more eclectic things to be completely obsessed about, you know, and throwing them in a blender, and maybe not calling from influences that are so widely used, I think is
Mhm.
probably. But I mean, it's not necessarily like there was a definitive change with like the rig, like sort of like me pulling a speed brake on it, going, I'm gonna change. But all this other stuff is very genuine in that it's just I become obsessed with it, and it's like the more you dig, the more you get into it, and
Yeah.
you just keep throwing it in there. What about you, man? I'm just curious. Like, what about I throw that back at you, like from a you know you say that like when you started finding your own voice, like what was it for you? I'm just curious.
Oh, it was,
That
initially all I cared about was Albert King and BB King. Those were the beginnings for me. And then it
mm,
was just Stevie. When I found Stevie,
mm,
obviously that took over. And yes,
yeah,
Stevie led to a lot of stuff. Like I wouldn't have heard Otis Rush without Stevie, and things like that. But Stevie took over so much so where that's what I did. I played like Stevie Ray Vaughan. I switched to a Strat. I wanted to be Stevie Ray Vaughan. But I'm a kid.
yeah,
12 years old, 13, 14.
yeah,
And
totally.
then I started to, get into jazz a little bit, because I was starting to play with better musicians, and some of them were jazzers. So they would say, "Hey, you should listen to this Charlie Christian, or you should listen to this Wes Montgomery," and then especially Charlie Parker. When I heard Charlie Parker, it was like that killed me because just the feel that he played with, the swing that he phrased with. So I started to get some of that in my playing, and then next thing I knew, someone gave me a tape and it had Danny Gatton, and that was really the
Yeah,
for me the real change of okay. When I started working on that stuff, I started hybrid picking, and when I started hybrid picking, it felt like okay, I've got my love of the blues. Now I'm learning some jazz and I like the phrasing of jazz and I'm starting to learn some jazz harmony. But now I'm picking everything like Danny Gatton because I'm obsessed with Danny Gatton and
right,
the way that he
right.
played. And also I loved the freedom that he would play anything anytime. Like if he heard it, he
Yeah, yeah,
played it. Just came out. And I felt like when I mixed
yeah,
those things together, all of a sudden it was like, hey, this thing I just played tonight on the gig, I'd never played that before. I'm gonna do more of that. And then it was conscious, and also it was influenced by the fact that around that time I was seeing so many guys playing Stevie Ray Vaughan, and it was
yeah,
I was a 13-year-old, but these guys were 45 years old, and it was like I
yeah,
don't want to look like that. That's not.
yeah,
I got a goal in mind here, so it was like I also knew I needed to turn away from that.
yeah. No, totally, totally.
Yeah.
I had a very similar, going back to my teenage years. I had a very similar, just with the Stevie thing in particular, because once I started traveling, like you say, like because I was very much, as a 12, 13-year-old kid, I was, I call it the stratoBlasting phase. I was there as well. And once I started traveling around and seeing that like every town had not just one, but five of
Yes.
them,
Yeah.
uh, that was something. But then also it was like, for me personally, like I was like 17 years old when I first heard the first Thunderbirds record,
Mm.
and once I heard Jimmy like in all of his glory, like it was over for me. I was like, that's my guy. Because it was like when I heard Girls Go Wild, it was just like, holy shit, check this guy out. And like
Well,
I got it. You know what I mean? Like
yeah. Yeah. Well, I just
so
remember also feeling like okay, obviously Stevie loved Albert King more than anything in the world,
yeah,
but
yeah,
but he wasn't just trying to copy Albert King, and Albert King
Yeah.
wasn't trying to copy anybody. And yeah, BB King loved fucking Charlie Christian and Django Reinhardt and T-Bone Walker, but he wasn't trying to copy those guys. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
They just kind of were being honest, and it felt like, man, if I'm not being honest, I'm fucking it up. So it was like I just got to
No, totally.
pay more attention to that. Yeah, yeah.
Totally.
Even though you can make an argument like Otis Rush, Buddy Guy, anybody, certainly post BB, they had periods where, just like we had periods of Stevieism, they were BB King. That's all they wanted to do.
Yeah, no, BB, I mean, shit, man. I mean, we wouldn't have, this is a great story, and I'll do it really quick. You probably already know. I'm sure you already know, but it's like Freddie King, like, his family moved to Chicago in 48 or 49, and he spent the entire decade of the 50s in Chicago as a kid, as a teenager, and growing into a man as a prodigy, this great guitar player, and couldn't get a deal. Chess wouldn't sign him, and Cobra wouldn't sign him because they said he sounded too much like BB. And it's like, thank God they didn't sign him, because then, dejected, he was on his way to move back to Texas in 1960. He stopped in Cincinnati and he did a pickup session at King Records for that Smokey Smothers record, where they needed somebody to play like Eddie Taylor, Eddie Taylor and Jimmy Rogers were the two guys who taught Freddie how to play and were like his mentor. And so he went in and did a good job, and they said, well, man, why don't you come back tomorrow? Maybe we'll cut something on you. And then he cuts Hideaway the next day. And we have Freddie King, like crazy, but yeah, no, I mean, it's like he loved BB King.
Oh, dude, BB turned out everybody. I mean, everybody. He turned out, I mean, he was the standard bearer, changed the whole game without question.
Totally.
Oh.
Totally.
All right, number 6.
So good.
What do you consider your biggest weakness on the guitar?
Biggest weakness on the guitar. That's interesting. My biggest weakness is probably chordal knowledge. I know enough to get me in trouble, but like you, there's friends of mine that it's just like, oh my God, the things that they can the things that they can comp at a moment's notice. Like I know all my, obviously, I mean, it's like I know all my inversions, and I know a fair amount of substitutions and so on and so forth, but it's like that rabbit hole is so deep that I can't claim. There's certain things that I feel really confident, like sharing and feeling like I have a really good grasp on, but that is absolutely not one of them.
I hear you.
And it's just, and to be completely frank, like so much of the type of stuff that absolutely like makes me be obsessed with it doesn't have a lot of that it's like I've avoided a fair amount of it on purpose, because like what if anything, I'm trying to play more primitively than I ever have. And that's a whole nother discussion, because to play primitively when you have knowledge and you have dexterity and stuff like that is arguably as hard as playing something super complicated. It's a very slippery slope between the two. And, I mean, obviously it goes without saying that it's like, if you're trying to play primal music that's really kind of fucked up, it's like you have to be really careful with what you put in there. And so, as much as I love Barney Kessel and I love Grant Green, it's like I'm very careful with like what I kind of put in, because there's only so much that I truly want to kind of be in what I'm doing, so
yeah,
but it's a big blind spot compared to many.
Okay. All right. It is a balancing act of, one that I've tried to deal with most of my life, like being in a blues guy at heart and wanting to sound a certain way in everything you do, but continuing to grow as a musician and push yourself and learn more things and get better, but still sound like that guy that you think you are in your mind and in
Yeah.
here. It's difficult.
Yeah.
It's a tightrope, you know.
And that's no, it definitely is. And that's where I think, my obsession for the last good bit with all this hill country stuff, R.L. Burnside, Fred McDowell, it's stuff that when you listen to it, you're like, oh, they're just doing this. But then you try and make it sound like that, and you just sound like white bread. Like it's so, you're not doing it, and it's like trying to internalize like phrasing and how certain things are supposed to feel. It's so subtle, and there's no real right way. Like, that's what's so fascinating to me about it, is that, like, having learned stuff that's incredibly like requires a lot of dexterity, or is complicated, it is so much more immersive and hard for me to like sit down with something really primitive and be like, I really want to be able to do this, because it's like, how do you do that? Like, that's the thing. It's different every time I sort of take something apart. Whereas if something is difficult, or it's fast, or it's harmonically complex or something, it's like there's a process I can apply to picking it apart and learning it. Whereas
100%.
this other stuff is more abstract, and it's like, it's I don't know. That's why I'm like all excited, because it's like,
no, you're
what's so
100%
fucking
right.
exciting.
You're 100% right. It's way harder to play Magic Sam Boogie right than it is to learn Spain by Chick Corea. You know what I mean?
No, it is, and it's just, I just can't. It's mystifying why that is, and it's also like, it just obsession doesn't even begin to cover it. It's just like, my wife like laughs, and she's like, "Can we just listen to something normal in the house?" And I'm like, "What is normal?" It's that channel. It's that channel on an amplifier I never plug into.
Yeah, exactly. Oh man. All right, number 7. Who's a huge influence on your guitar playing that people would be surprised to hear?
That's a really good question. I guess that there's two. One is probably more obvious than others, but like growing up in the early '90s, early and mid '90s, I loved the Red Hot Chili Peppers. So Frusciante is definitely. I just love John Frusciante, but I'll take it a step further. I love Nirvana. I love Nirvana a lot, and I love Kurt Cobain's guitar playing, and it brings out all the normal kind of childhood stuff, especially in utero. I sort of had an elitist a view of music even as a grade schooler, and so Nevermind was too fucking commercial for me. I was like, it's good, but have you heard this? So when In Utero came out, I was like, fuck yes, like, because it was just so much raw, and I loved it. So yeah, I would probably say that is. I think most people wouldn't think of that. I don't know if I talk about it that much, but I love Kurt Cobain and his guitar playing.
Nice.
So,
all right. Number 8. Would you rather have on a gig a great guitar and a shitty amp, or vice versa? A great amp and a shitty guitar.
Vice versa. I would rather have a shitty guitar and a great amp, personally.
Yeah, I'm with you 100%.
Without a doubt. Because to be honest with you, like, I mean, obviously I play my guitar, this one all the time, but I have a lot of these old K's and punch-up guitars. I love shitty guitars. I love them. I absolutely love them. And there's a thing that they do that nothing else can do. And it's like that with a good super reverb or something else all day long, son. All day long.
But you wouldn't love that. You wouldn't love that K guitar into a JC 120.
No, not at all. Not at all. Not at all. No,
Yeah.
no, 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 no. Not at all. Not at
Yeah.
all.
And I'm
I'm
sorry if
curious
you like
how many.
JC 120s. It's no affront to you. I'm sorry.
No, 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 not at all. Not at all. I'm curious. Is there anybody? Is everybody answer that? Is that typically
Oh,
an?
split 50-50.
Is it really?
Yeah, but a lot of
Is it
guys rely on a very specific guitar to do their thing, and where they wouldn't function
That's
without that guitar.
interesting. Okay. All right. That makes sense.
Yeah.
That's crazy, man.
Yeah, but I'm
You can
100%
tell
with you.
we've done a lot of fly dates, man. We've done a
Exactly.
lot of fly dates.
Yeah.
It's like oh yeah, we got this red knob twin that one speaker is blown,
Yeah.
and here you go, buddy.
Well, if you want, go look at Stevie Ray Vaughan Umbria Jazz Festival, or in Finland with the wall of Marshall combos, and see if he's enjoying having his main guitar through those amps. He's not. Yeah.
I've never seen that footage, but I've seen a picture of the one with all the with the shitty Marshalls. I've seen
Dude,
pictures of it.
there's the one with the shitty Marshalls, but even worse, in Umbria, they got there and something happened with the back line, and they couldn't even get him twins, and he's
Wow.
playing through a Fender Stage 2 combo, like 80s one,
Yeah.
with a 15-inch extension cabinet under it, and then like an Alembic preamp and power amp and some PA speakers. It's insanity.
Yes. Oh, that's so great.
Yeah. It was
Oh,
like
that's
somebody brought
awesome.
the shit down to the gig last minute because something happened with the back line. Here's what I got for you, bro. And it's a Umbria Jazz Festival. Like, yeah.
God, that's so killer. Oh,
Yeah.
that's awesome.
Yeah. All right, cool. So you and I are on the same page there.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
All right. Number
Uh,
9. What keeps you so motivated? Like, I know you're an obsessive, like you said. So if it's hill country music right now or Fela, you listen to something, you get obsessed, and it pushes you to grow. But how does that never change? How do you always have that? Like, I'm always curious what keeps you pushing to better yourself as a musician.
well, I don't think I don't know. Like I think the key to it is I don't view it as like I'm doing this to better myself. Um I I love listening to music as much as I love playing it. I really do. Like I get as much enjoyment from sitting with my records, which is my main passion. Like that's and that's another thing that like people ask me. Like if you ask me on a normal day on the road, would you go to a record store or would you go to a music store? I never would go to a music store. It's always a record store. I
Right.
never will go to a music store. I don't. It's just not. It's not. I'll go to a record store every day, and flip through the bins and dig. And I'm an absolute crate digger when it comes down to it. And that's the secret for me is that I just there's it got ignited like back, the story I told about being in the car and not having listened to music. Once I relit the fuse of what it feels like to discover music that I haven't heard before, it's the dominant part of my daily routine. My Spotify is insane because it's every single day I'm on there trying to find. I try and listen to at least a record a day that I hadn't heard before, that I didn't know existed.
Wow.
And it can be anything. It can be anything. And the thing that's beautiful about that is it's so easy, because it's like at this point, what's kind of programmed into my algorithm is so schizophrenic that it's like at any given point, it's, obviously there's a lot of kind of, there's a lot of funk and a lot of R&B music, and there's a lot of like blues and a lot of um there's a lot of all that, but then there's other things that come up, like, for example, like there was a couple of weeks ago where I got really into listening to Steinhausen, which was a avant-garde composer from Germany in the 70s, and he like he wrote these piano concertos that are kind of like sort of like Glass. You know, they're a little they're a little out there, but they're not completely, you know, like atonal and weird. But then he had this era in the early 70s where he made these, you know, essentially soundscape records that are kind of 10 years before Brian Eno would kind of pioneer that. And it's literally soundscapes, it's sound effects and all this kind of stuff. And I mean, it is absolutely crazy people music. But I, like, for whatever reason, like, I was ready to kind of like dive into it for several days, and I actually was enjoying it. Like, I wasn't doing it because I felt I needed to. I wasn't doing it to be ironic or anything. Like, I was generally like, I got, I saw something on a John Spencer Blues Explosion record that like cited Steinhausen, and I was like, well, let me read about this, and then I listened to it, and it's like, you know, it's complete, it's crazy people music, you know, but it's like, I just like it. I like that discovery process. I like that feeling of clicking on a record that I have no idea what it is, or I like that thing of running through the bins and picking something up and going, well, man, this looks cool. I wonder what this is, you know, like that. It's just, that's a big part of my daily, you know, my daily thing, you know, and that just transfers over into musicianship because you're just continually feeding your subconscious. And I very actively like there's certain things that I'll get into and I'll listen, but I do make a point like not to like let any one thing specifically kind of dominate my listening, because I think that affects me negatively. And there's certain things I'll avoid in particular because I know it'll affect me negatively from a musician standpoint. And certain things, on the contrary, like there's certain things that always lead me to a good place too. You know, like there's certain things that inspire me in a really good way that seem to. So anyway, I could go on for days about this, obviously.
I just dig the, you know, the constant exploration. I need to be better about that on my Spotify. You know, it's like sometimes if I go into the, you know, I've never heard this section before, what's new, or recommended things that I've never heard. If it doesn't grab me right away, I immediately go back and listen to something I love. You know what I mean? I need to be better about that.
But that's the thing, is that like, even if you don't like one thing, you can move on to another record. And it's like, because that's the thing, like, you know, relatively quickly when you click on something, if you think it's hip, you know what I mean?
Oh yeah.
So
right
it's
away.
like, and I've gotten turned on to so many, I mean, it's just crazy. I mean, like, you know, and part of that also is the pandemic, where it's like, I've had more time than I've ever had to concentrate.
Of course.
So it's like, but my knowledge of like what music exists in the world today is better than it's ever been. And it's completely because of that. And it's fucking fun, man. It's so much good shit exists. It's amazing.
Yeah. All right. Number 10, man. Do you have a 5-year plan? Is there somewhere you want to be? Or is it more, let me just go what feels natural, follow the path, whatever? Or do you have some specific goals that you would like to check off?
No, I don't. Once upon a time, I thought that way. No, I very much am a one day at a time person right now. Um, I'm a happier person living one day at a time, honestly. Um, Part of what made me not enjoy life, um, and drove me crazy was kind of, you know, I need every, you know, part of being obsessed with listening to music, and discovering new music is because it's so in the moment. It's like I need, for me to be happy and enjoy my day, anything I can do to kind of stay rooted in the moment I'm in. Because when I stop doing the self-care things and stop doing the things that I have now learned to do to help myself, my hamster wheel starts turning, the gratitude meter gets shut off, and all of a sudden I'm obsessing over things that I can't control. I'm obsessing over things that don't really matter. They're not here. And, you know, it's amazing to me time and time again, when I look at my entire life, literally the biggest like positive things that have happened in my personal life happened because I was doing what I was supposed to be doing at a specific moment, and seemingly something just fell out of the sky and I was ready to receive it. You
Mm.
know, it wasn't because I tried to jam something that I was wanting or thought I wanted. Um, More often than not, when I was kind of approaching life from that standpoint, I was pretty fucking miserable, you know? And so, that's for me at the moment, it's literally just trying to take it one day at a time, as they say.
Nice. Well, all right.
It works if you work it, and you're worth it.
Yes. Oh man. Well, that's the end of the 10 questions. Dude, thank you for doing this. It's a pleasure to, get a little bit more of your story. Um, for the rulers, hang on, we'll do turn 2. But if you're not a ruler yet, please become a ruler or at least subscribe to the channel because it will help keep me motivated to continue to do stuff during this period of time. So I appreciate that. And dude, thank you. Thank you for taking time out of your day to do this with
Dude,
me.
dude, it's my pleasure. I love you like a family member, and I'm grateful. Thanks for asking me to do it. And you all pimp out my man Josh, man, because he's the shit. And you can print that.
All right, you heard it. All right, thanks everybody. And rulers, we'll be right back. Thanks, JD.